Logging from your application is essential to get an idea of how the application is behaving, and it also helps with solving potential issues. Applications should have a decent logging strategy implemented. In our demo application, whenever a feature is executed, like searching for destinations, getting the itineraries, and so on, the logging behavior is automatically executed. This logging behavior logs, at this level, which feature is being requested. Code-wise, this should look very familiar. I'm essentially just inserting a logger and using that logger to log something of level information. This is the default way of logging inside of an ASP.NET Core application. I also didn't change anything to the default ASP.NET Core loggers, so by default the console and the debug logger are configured. On top of that, the dependencies our application code has, like on the ASP.NET Core framework itself and on Entity Framework Core, all also have their own logging strategies implemented. So, in other words, there's quite a bit of logging going on each request. But how do we get to see those logs when the app is deployed to Azure? The first thing we need to do is enable application logging. For that, let's open the portal. Now we want to navigate to the monitoring section down here and choose App Service Logs. Here we can enable application logging to the file system and or to blob storage. To quickly view logs, enabling logging to the file system is what you want to do. Two different ways to view these logs, which I'll cover right after this, depend on this. You can choose the log level here as well, say information. And let's also enable logs from the web server itself. So not our application logs, but logs from the web server to the file system. Note that file system logging is automatically disabled again after 12 hours. So this really is something to do when you think there is a live issue going on. Let's also enable detailed error message. Now let's click Save. Alright, with that we can learn how to view these logs. A quick and easy way to view your application logs or web server logs is via the log stream. You can find that underneath the monitoring section of your app service. Down here, let's click that. What this does is display real-time logs from the app service. To make sure this works, we must have enabled file system logging. We just did that. Let's give this a try by getting the destinations. That seems to have worked. And if we have a look at what's being logged now, we see a bunch of information coming from referenced packages, but we also see our own custom application log here. If you wish, you can also filter here on log level. Important to know is that this is just a filter, so even though verbose is selected here by default, we won't see anything with level verbose showing up because we didn't configure it like that in the previous clip. We configured file system logging to only log level information or worse. Anyway, that's how to access the application logs. To do the same for web server logs, you can simply click web server logs here. So that was easy enough, right? Let's look into downloading these logs next. Application Insights is a feature of something called Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor, as the name implies, is used for monitoring on Azure. That often means infrastructure level monitoring or monitoring of the Azure platform itself, and that is what the next section is about. But there's also Application Insights. Application Insights focuses on application-specific insights. It can collect logs, but it goes way beyond that. It also collects other telemetry about our app, like various metrics and counters, full requests and responses, errors, including stack traces, and so on. Next to that, it enables various ways to view and analyze the data it captures. From an at-a-glance assessment of your application's health and performance via the application dashboard, over a failures and performance view, to live metrics of your deployed application. In the upcoming clips, we'll dive into the most important, useful features. But let's start with enabling it for our application. To enable Application Insights for our application, we must configure our ASP.NET Core app to send telemetry data like logs and metrics to App Insights. We're in Visual Studio. Via Project, add Application Insights telemetry, we can enable App Insights support. So let's click this. And let's choose to connect to Azure App Insights. You can also simply install the SDK locally without configuring the connection to Azure if you want. That's the first option here. But, well, we also want our data to show up over on Azure. So we need the second one. We haven't got an application insights resource for our API yet, so let's create a new one. Obviously, you can also do this via the Azure portal by adding a new application insights resource and via the CLI. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that by now, as the principle is not different from all the other resources we created previously. I'm going to follow the naming guidelines we've been using all along, so appdev-appi for application insights, dev for environment, WE for West Europe, and travel inspiration. How you want to name and reuse this depends on your use case and strategy. I want to monitor and log everything related to our travel inspiration app in one App Insights instance, so this application insights resource would be the one to use for our travel inspiration app service, our related storage and other Azure services. Let's make sure we select the correct resource group and location. And then what we need to select here is an Azure Log Analytics workspace. That's new. You can look at it as some sort of data store that can be used to collect different types of data related to logging. In other words, it consists of a bunch of tables catered to different types of logs. Think about data coming from application insights, but also from other services like other Azure services, custom apps, third-party applications, and Microsoft tools like Excel and Power BI. So in essence, it's a central repository for all of your log data. A big advantage of this centralized approach is that you can organize all your logs, for example, those related to a specific set of applications, in one place. And that can be useful for analysis across different services and apps, or auditing or compliance requirements you might have at your firm. Let's add a new workspace for all things related to our travel inspiration system. Log is the common abbreviation for a log analytics workspace. There we go. Let's click Create. There we go. We now have an application insights instance and a related log analytics workspace. Let's click Next. We are now linking that application insights instance to our API. We need to provide a connection string name for that and a value. This will be pre-filled for us with a connection string that connects to the App Insights instance we just created. Let's click Next. Here we see what's going to happen to our project. So some NuGet packages will be added, configurations will be created, the App Insights instance will be linked, and so on. Let's click Finish. And there we go. If we have a look at the NuGet packages, we now indeed see a new Microsoft.applicationinsights.ASP.NET Core package that has been added. What I like to do now is check for updates. Depending on how up-to-date your Visual Studio instance is, this may or may not automatically install the latest version of App Insights. In my case, that seems to be okay, so we're good to go. Code changes have happened as well. Let's open the program class. What we see here is that a call into builder.services.addApplicationInsightsTelemetry has been added. A new options object is passed through, which sets the connection string to application insights connection string from our configuration. That's the name we just inputted in the wizard. If you look at our app settings file, we indeed find an application insights section with a connection string underneath it. Interesting fact here is that this means that even when working locally, our telemetry data will get stored in App Insights. If you do not want that, you can simply surround this call here with a check on whether or not you're in the development environment. So far for the local changes. Let's save all this and let's deploy it. So we choose Publish. And as you can see down here, a service dependency on application insights has been added. I can connect to this. That's again the same connection string. Now let's click finish. There we go. Before I publish, let's switch the configuration back to release. Let's save. Now let's publish. And while deploying is going on in the background, let's quickly switch to the portal. I'm going to look for Application Insights instances. Here we go. In case that at any given time you need to find the connection string, this is where you can find it, over on the overview blade of your Application Insights instance. In the meanwhile, it seems like the update has been deployed. Let's send a few requests so that telemetry data like app metrics and the things we log from inside of our application can start being stored and handled via Application Insights. So let me send a few requests to get some destinations. I'm going to do that a few times. Let's send a few to get itineraries. There we go. And a few more times. And let's say we also want to get the stops related to an itinerary. So let me get the stops. Yeah, let's do that a few times as well. And that should be sufficient. It may take a little while for some of this telemetry data to be processed, but after that we should be able to inspect it. In the next few clips, we will look into a few scenarios that have now been enabled thanks to Application Insights.